Is the new Doctor Who Israeli propaganda? In a recent episode, Doctor Who and his friend Belinda time travel to a future space Eurovision with aliens. But oh no, terrorists are attacking the show and they're gonna kill everyone watching at home? Only Doctor Who can save the day with his little sonic screwdriver. But the Doctor is triggered. He's triggered because he's the survivor of a genocide and he immediately threatens to murder one of the terrorists and watch him die slowly.
I will stand and watch you freeze to death.
Then he tortures him, electrocuting him over and over and over and over. And look, it's Graham Norton! And then there's a cute little montage and hugs and the Doctor rescues everyone. And then one of the contestants sings a song to teach everyone that racism is wrong and all the racists stop being racist. So as you can see, this episode isn't all just duggers and doos. In fact, with direct allusions to Israel, this episode read, to many, as commentary on Israel and Palestine. So the pitch for this episode was Eurovision meets Die Hard. These horned terrorists are from the planet Helia, and so is the nice lady who sings the final song. But here's the thing, Helia is under occupation. A corporation called Poppy Honey has bought the planet, enslaved its people, stolen and destroyed their natural resources, and killed the mother of Kid, one of the terrorists.
And his mother was shot before anyone asked her his name.
But Poppy Honey is also the sponsor of the contest, so
the corporation will be remembered for a massacre.
And if Poppy Honey is giving you the vibes of real-life Eurovision sponsor, the Israeli company Moroccan Oil, there's a reason for that. In the last couple of years, the real-life Eurovision has been heavily defined by Israel's participation. Russia was kicked out for their war crimes, but Israel is not only allowed to stay, they have also been allowed to turn the contest into their own propaganda show. So if Poppy Honey is Israel, then Helia is Palestine, and the terrorists trying to kill 3 trillion people at a music show are Palestinians. But the weird thing is, the Doctor never actually engages with Poppy Honey at all. All of his rage and wrath are projected onto Kid.
And you can run and hide and whimper all you like, but I will find you. I will cast your body out into the void.
But this is weird, right? Doctor Who isn't like that. In fact, the episode before Interstellar, we had a similar setup with a villain out to commit mass murder, but in the end, the Doctor gives him an opportunity to repent and become a productive member of society. And then he met Kid and was like, bzzz. Meanwhile, the Poppy Honey Corporation seemed to get away with, enslaving a whole planet. The nice Hellion Cora was a contestant, but kept her race secret because Hellions aren't allowed to sing. But after Kid is arrested, she is allowed to sing a song about Helia, and everyone who was super racist against Hellions before
say they practice cannibalism and witchcraft
is suddenly cured of their racism through the power of song. But the corporation is just never mentioned again. The Doctor never even talks about them, and we have no idea what happens next. Are the Hellions still enslaved? Is their planet occupied? Did Poppy Honey get YouTube revenue from Cora's song? What was this episode actually trying to say about Israel and Palestine? Why does it feel like we have the Doctor torturing a Palestinian while completely ignoring Israeli violence and kind of participating in it? Well, as the channel who obsesses weirdly over Doctor Who and Eurovision, and especially Israel and Eurovision, who better to devote ourselves to overthinking this until we've lost what little sanity we had left. So go grab a snack, have a quick wee, we're going deep. Doctor Who began as the British Empire was in its last throes, decolonisation was taking place, and British identity was still adapting to that. As a result, so was Doctor Who. Various stories deal directly with colonialism, such as Colony in Space, The Mutants, and The Power of Kroll. These were stories specifically about British imperialism, about the peoples Britain colonised and oppressed. The Mutants was specifically about apartheid South Africa.
Segregation. Genocide is a side effect.
We might not be able to talk openly about the horrors of the British Empire, but we sure can use white people in green makeup to comment on it. But early Doctor Who was a confusing period, and not everyone saw eye to eye. In the case of early 70s Who, an era which was heavily defined by its relationship to post-colonialism, you had a hippie producer,
anti-imperialist,
alongside this script editor,
because I was rather pro the British Empire. You have a look at Africa, Asia and the rest of the world. If the Brits were in charge, it'd all be running smoothly.
So you might get one story where the oppressed people conveniently kill themselves off so the colonisers can enjoy their planet, followed by another, which is a great big fuck you to racism and British imperialism, where the oppressed people turn into flying gay angels and vaporise the colonisers. She's serving decolonisation. There are other types of invasion or colonial stories such as Dalek or Cybermen invasions, but these tend to be about fears of Nazis or communists invading Britain. But when we talk about British colonial allegories, it tends to be pretty clear. So in most of these stories, you have two opposing groups, the oppressed, like the native Solonians and the mutants, and the colonisers, like the Earth Empire, who who are colonising the planet. But if the oppressed represent native peoples and the colonisers are British or European colonisers, then who does the Doctor represent? I mean, he's an alien, right? He's like a third party. But then why does this guy feel so fucking British? So the Doctor is an alien called a Time Lord of a race of super advanced time travellers who are now all but extinct. But let's be real, he is also British, isn't he?
I was sort of made, well, sort of homeless, and that was the Earth.
Not just the Earth, specifically England becomes his home. He repeatedly comes back to England, he knows it intimately, and the majority of his companions are English. He eats jelly babies, plays cricket and football, and is restored by the special powers of English breakfast tea. He watches British television, loves Eurovision. He's a friend of the royals and literally knighted. When he actually visits medieval Palestine, his sympathies lie with the King of England's efforts to conquer Jerusalem. In the 80s, the Doctor wore a Victorian cricket outfit representing not just Englishness, but Englishness of a bygone era when cricket was marked by racial distinctions and was a symbol of British imperial power. He hobnobs with British politicians and is close friends with Winston Churchill.
The world doesn't need me. Well, it's got Winston, Spencer, Churchill.
Oh yes, Winston Churchill, that great British Prime Minister who the whole world needs. If only he were here today to help the Palestinians. What was it he said about Palestinians again? I do not admit that the dog in the manger has the final right to the manger, even though he may have lain there for a very long time. I do not admit that a wrong has been done to those people by the fact that a stronger race, a higher grade race, or at any rate a more worldly wise race, to put it that way, has come in and taken their place. Wow, okay, this is the man the Doctor thinks the world needs. Or is it perhaps rather that by the world, the Doctor means the British Empire? So as we can see, the Doctor's Britishness runs pretty deep in his characterisation, even if he is meant to be from space.
He's British!
I suppose I am.
But this also extends to the actors who play him. Until recently, they had all been white. In fact, the first 9 Doctors were all blue-eyed and spoke mostly with English accents. It's only as the definition of Britishness has been allowed to expand to become more inclusive over the last decade that we've seen the Doctor's accent change, and now even his race. If we look at the 70s Doctor Who, the original version of the Doctor's arch-nemesis, fellow Time Lord, the Master, was originally played by Roger Delgado. While the Doctor was fair-haired and blue-eyed, the darker-featured Delgado was famous for roles in which he wore brown face, often as a villain, as he is here wearing a Palestinian keffiyeh. Delgado himself once said he's always cast as a villain because he looks dark and foreign. His role as the Master isn't explicitly non-white, but I think it's notable that while the Doctor tended to wear Victorian and Edwardian European attire, the Master wore a Mandarin collar. I'm not saying this was a conscious racial choice, just that this was the cultural context, the vibes around race and heroes and villains of the time, and to highlight that the Doctor's whiteness was relevant to how he might have been seen racially. So what does it mean for this character, who is coded as both an outsider and as white British, to be the arbiter of truth and goodness in stories about European colonialism? John Valitka argues that in stories about colonialism, the Doctor tends to represent science and the European Enlightenment. The Doctor is a champion of Western ideals who sides with the natives/victims to liberate them, using the power of his Western scientific knowledge. But the Doctor's not just any scientist. He is one of the great and powerful Time Lords.
We're the most civilized civilization in the universe.
And there's kind of this idea in classic Who that technological advancement often comes hand in hand with moral advancement. First, a race is savage, with savage tools and savage morals. Then they become slightly more advanced barbarians. Then enlightened and rational, like the highly civilized Europeans. And finally, they will become super brainy space people with rockets and big collars and the most civilized morals of all. This is called stagism, and it's based on real-world European racism. And in classic Doctor Who tales of colonialism, this is how all races develop.
Human beings must be allowed to develop at their own pace. You give them breech-loading guns now, they'll have atomic weapons by the 17th century. They'll have the capability to destroy their own planet before they're civilized enough to handle it.
They might go at different paces, but European history is the blueprint for development, and post-Enlightenment England is the gold standard for what it means to be civilized.
Definitely civilization.
So no wonder the Doctor can't change history. All cultures are on this one trajectory, and we mustn't mess with it.
You can't rewrite history, not one line!
Now, in the real world, one might suggest that European imperialism was successful because Europeans had really powerful weapons and could murder people very efficiently. But European colonizers would say that their powerful weapons were actually proof of their powerful morals, and all the murder was actually super fucking civilized. It was actually like really good murder. When foreigners kill people, it's savagery. However, when enlightened Europeans kill people, it's just civilizing them by bringing them democracy. Sound familiar? So when we meet the Aztecs and try to save them from being colonized, the only way to do that is to sort of preemptively civilize them. The companion says the Aztecs have an evil side to their nature, which is ritual sacrifice. But of course, the idea of Europeans civilizing the Aztecs through colonialism and mass murder, well, that's actually perfectly civilized. But when it turns out the Aztecs can't be civilized, we leave them to their fate. It never occurs to anyone for a moment to just tell them of what's coming. The uncivilized will get what's coming to them. But then on the opposite end of the spectrum, there's Kinder.
They're just a bunch of ignorant savages. If the Kinder are so clever, how is it they didn't build their own interplanetary vehicle and come and colonize us?
The Kinder people are validated by the discovery that they wear a DNA double helix, proving that they are sufficiently advanced and civilized by European standards, and thus the narrative affords them self-determination and liberation from colonialism, as opposed to the uncivilized Aztecs. So while a lot of these episodes are anti-imperialist, they are arguing against imperialism using old imperialist logic. Instead of saying no culture is superior and no culture has the right to genocide others, the show is saying, well, really, cultural superiority is real, and technological advancement does go hand in hand with moral advancement, which makes the Doctor the most morally righteous because he's the most scientifically advanced person in the whole wide universe, making him the real arbiter of right and wrong. So once again, in this sense, the Doctor represents European colonial values. And for an example of who the show considers the opposite of that, let's have a look at everyone's favourite Palestinian terrorist-inspired companion, Leela. Leela was named after and inspired by Leila Khaled, a Palestinian freedom fighter who is perhaps best known for hijacking an American plane in 1969 to draw attention to America's complicity in Israel's violence against the Palestinian people. Leela's creator, Chris Boucher, said of Leila Khaled, she was not only infamous, but she was also extremely glamorous. And she was. She was the paper's favourite 70s girl terrorist and deadly beauty. Wow, okay. Girl dinner, girl boss, girl terrorist. In her plane hijackings, she never actually hurt anyone, so she just became this cool, hot icon. But the Doctor Who Leela was a bit different. Leila Khaled mixed with Emma Peel from The Avengers. She was played by a white actress who, in the beginning, wore brown contact lenses and brown face makeup, which was initially very, very dark, but in the first broadcast episode, not quite so dark. And Leela was meant to be, and I quote, a savage.
You're a savage.
Savage. Is she a primitive?
Oh, very, very.
Inspired by Pygmalion, the idea was that the savage Leela would be civilized, My Fair Lady style, by the Doctor.
I too used to believe in magic, but the Doctor has taught me about science. It is better to believe in science.
By the time Leela's education is over, she's actually become blue-eyed, and I think paler in the makeup department, so that's that. But time moves on. Ruthlessly. The 2005 Doctor Who revival toned down the language and no longer called people savage and barbarian, but it definitely still subscribed to the same ideas.
That psychograph is banned on every civilized planet.
This planet is just starting. These stupid little people have only just learned how to walk, but they're capable of so much more.
There were also definitely still imperialist allegories like Planet of the Ood.
The second great and bountiful human empire.
Is that good or bad though? I mean, are we like explorers or more like a virus?
A story in which the Doctor and Donna land on the Ood's homeworld, which has been colonised and its people enslaved.
Great big empire built on slavery.
Mr. Halpin is our big evil corporate boss, and he excuses the enslavement of the Ood via stagism.
The Ood were nothing without us, just animals roaming around on the ice.
They justify their violence as civilizing the savages. In this story, the Doctor actually doesn't have a significant hand in the liberation of the Ood. The Ood do it themselves, largely through violent resistance, but also by turning Mr. Halpin into an Ood. So I guess is that violence? I don't know. He's transitioned. He seems happy enough.
Being with you, I can't tell what's right and what's wrong anymore.
It's better that way.
The funniest part of the episode is at the end when the Ood have liberated themselves and the Doctor and Donna didn't really do anything, and the Ood are like,
our children will sing of the Dr. Donna and our children's children.
But like, why? They didn't do anything. But I think this is the fantasy, right? It's commenting on Britain's colonial legacy with a fantasy of what a white British person of today would do. They're like, I would save the slaves so hard, I'd be so good to them that they would talk about how nice I was literally forever. This also explains how the Doctor can be positioned both as British and as an outsider, an advanced alien. He is like a future or present Brit in conversation with the British past. But New Who was a long time ago now. The newest era of Doctor Who, starring Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor, has a new relationship to the Doctor and his Britishness. The lead actor playing the Doctor is black, which means he experiences racism in situations he never would have before. This is an incarnation who could never have been friends with Winston bloody Churchill. In one of his first episodes, the Doctor tries to rescue a colony of humans who turn out to be white supremacists and refuse his help.
That's voodoo.
And now, the UK isn't really the Doctor's exclusive adopted home on Earth anymore. We learned that Nigeria has become a second home to him.
Some parts of the Earth are now treated differently. In Africa, in that barbershop, I'm accepted.
So now we have a sort of Nigerian Doctor as well as a British Indian companion, meaning both have roots in countries formerly colonised by the British. And I can't help but wonder if in preparation for this new era, showrunner Russell T Davies read a lot of the same articles we did for this video, because the idea of the Doctor representing European scientific enlightenment has definitely shifted a bit. In fact, in this era, science isn't the main arbiter of anything, because now magic is real, which means all gods from all religions are real.
I met Dionysus.
And Anansi purposely lost a bet to make me marry one of his daughters.
I am learning the vocabulary of rope.
All cultures are worthy of respect on their own terms. There is no European scientific supremacy. In fact, the main villain of the era is a scientist, a racist Time Lord supremacist. She takes over the Earth and uses science as justification for racism, for abuse of the people she perceives as lesser. And her hubris leads to her destruction at the hands of a god, or, well, the mouth of a god. The show also kind of drops the idea that you can't meddle with time. Time meddling is now fully on the table. And this is an era actively commenting on race and imperialism in the history of Doctor Who.
What was all that Egyptian stuff?
Cultural appropriation.
There's a whole world out there, untamed. We can go out there to this planet and we can fight it and tame it and own it. We'll be pioneers, just like our ancestors.
Do you know why Wales has so many picturesque little castles? They were torture centres set up by the English to rule with fear.
Now, whether or not all this works well isn't for us to say. That video essay is someone else's to make. But the point is we have a new Doctor and a new relationship to colonialism and empire, and what could possibly go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? Okay, so now we know a bunch of stuff. Let's go. Let's use everything we've learned about Doctor Who and colonialism to try and make sense of this fucking episode. So who are our players? Usually we have the native population, the victims, the Ood, the Solonians, whoever. And then we have the big evil imperialists, or maybe just an evil corporation representing imperialists like Earth Empire or Ood Operations. Ood Operations. I always think of that Smooth Operator song, sorry. Anyway. And they'll have some prick running the show like the Marshal or Mr. Halpin, who will be overthrown, defeated. And then there's the Doctor, our beacon of hope, our moral compass, here to show everyone the way. So in Interstellar, we have the natives, the Hellions, we have the big evil corporation, Poppy Honey. But here we run into our first strange problem of the episode. Where is the Marshal? Where's Mr. Halpin? There is no one in this episode who represents the corporation, just some ads in the background. We see racism expressed to varying degrees, which by the end of the episode everyone will have overcome due to Cora's lovely song, of course. But there is no bad guy, no prick in a suit demanding that they shut down Cora's song or anything. It's almost conspicuous in its absence. In fact, all the more so if you look at the last time Eurovision was fictionalized, the 2020 film Eurovision: The Story of Fire Saga, which similarly ends with a song sung against the rules of the contest in the native language of the contestant. But in this film, we do have a prick in a suit, exactly the kind of villain you might expect to represent the Poppy Honey Corporation, who you can totally picture being backstage making decisions to try and discriminate against the Hellions. One is also reminded of another film about a contest and a terrorist attack, Miscongeniality, in which we have another evil insider who runs the show. So within both of these genres, the competition comedy film and the Doctor Who colonialism commentary, it's weird that this character is absent. The writer of Interstellar, Juno Dawson, said that in this episode, nobody is a villain and nobody is a hero. And while I can see that she might have been going for this, the final result is that Kid is the ultimate villain of the episode. He's the only tangible bad guy, and he is violently punished for it in a way most bad guys are not, including last week's. I mean, I don't think there's ever been an episode where at the end the Doctor, tortures the Master. This just isn't a thing in Doctor Who. And we never learn what happens to the Corporation. Are they still sponsoring the contest? Are they still occupying Hellier? Are Hellions still enslaved? In other Doctor Who colonial stories, not only are the colonizers defeated, but there's some sort of victory, a liberation for the colonized people. That's the whole point of everything, to give them their planet back. So out of our 3 players, the colonizer, the colonized, and the Doctor, we just forget about the colonizer and we make the colonized the real villain of the episode. But hang on, what about the Doctor? Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor has been carefully established as a sort of post-colonial Doctor, but this episode seems to forget about that. In Interstellar, actually, he's just British. He discusses his personal relationship to Eurovision.
I was there in 74 when ABBA won.
He talks about meeting Graham Norton at Brighton Pride. And despite this whole thing being in space, this is a very European song contest. British TV personality Rylan is hosting. His co-host is a cat lady, but she is also French. So this is recognisably European, and the Doctor is also recognisably European, positioning him on the side of the colonisers. He listens to Gary being racist about the Hellions and doesn't question it at all.
They say the Hellions did it to themselves.
But the Doctor doesn't feel particularly enlightened in this episode. Bzzz. The Doctor takes his time with the torture.
How many people did you want to kill? 3 trillion! How about we try this 3 trillion times?
But then Belinda comes in and stops him. He looks at his torture glove in horror, and then Belinda hugs him. Then later she says,
"You're wonderful. You scared me back there."
I scared myself.
And that's that. There's no processing, no remorse, no apologies. We just move on. So although in universe I can make sense of why the Doctor did what he did, where he is in his mental health journey, his mild regret over torturing someone, as an allegory, his torture fits perfectly into the enlightened European idea of violence, where there's 2 types of violence: the savage violence, which is bad, and the civilized violence, which it doesn't really count. In Interstellar, the Doctor's violence and the Corporation's violence are seen as regrettable, but we never properly confront them. It's like, this is the violence committed by Europeans, so we're not going to dwell on it. But Kid's violence is savage violence, so it counts as real violence that has to be stopped by the enlightened Doctor. And let's be clear, Kid's violence is so epic, so massive, 3 trillion people, unimaginable violence, on par with the Time War violence, probably worse than occupying and enslaving 20 planets. Have I ever seen this level of violence in Doctor Who except for Logopolis or The Flux? This is Sutekh, the god of death type violence. This is so far beyond a single genocide. You'd need a whole new word for this. So it's not just that there's the savage terrorist violence and the more civilized European violence. This episode is written in a way where savage violence and native resistance is objectively worse than the initial colonialism. And because we don't have a Mr. Halpin in this episode, because the Corporation is completely absent, Kid's violence is also misdirected. He's not a freedom fighter liberating his people from the colonizers. He's just a dickhead. There's no indication that this would even kill anyone who has anything to do with the Corporation. Everyone Kid is trying to kill is essentially an innocent bystander who doesn't know any better. And if, like he says, the goal is to make the Corporation known for a massacre, then that even implies that the Corporation will survive the massacre. Unlike, say, the violence the Ood committed when fighting back against their enslavers, which is portrayed as understandable, Kid's violence is completely and utterly unjustifiable. And in particular, in 2025, when we're all sitting at home witnessing a genocide live stream to our phones, justified as revenge for a terrorist attack, we get a sense that this episode contains a moral about the nature of resistance. And this is a major reason why the episode feels so pro-Israel. This is how Israel conceives of violence. Palestinian violence counts as violence, whereas Israeli violence doesn't. Israelis committing mass slaughter and stealing Palestinian land to establish an apartheid state is not violence, it's bringing democracy to the Middle East. A Palestinian child throwing stones is terrorism. Killing that child is justice. October 7th is real violence. Slaughtering more than 19,000 children and starving the entire population of Gaza is not violence, It's saving Western civilization. And the episode contrasts Kid's method of resistance with Cora's, because at the end of the episode, Cora decides to sing her song.
This is a song the corporation tried to hide. The song of my home planet.
And though it's not clear why an arena full of anti-Hellion racists who were just ejected into space by Hellion terrorists allowed another Hellion to sing her little song, the idea is that this act of visibility is enough to change everyone's minds, and racism is suddenly over. Although whether this actually ended the occupation of Hellier or damaged the corporation's profits in any way, we'll probably never know. But if we see this in the context of Palestinian resistance, the message seems to be that you shouldn't commit acts of violence, but rather you should peacefully resist through the power of song. So that's where Gaza went wrong. To be clear, I am like a pacifist in my soul to the point where I have emotional problems killing mosquitoes, but I also have emotional problems with fucking hypocrites. Now, looking back at the real world of Eurovision, we find that Palestine, like Hellier, has no voice at the song contest, while Israel is one of the biggest voices. Because there are two conditions for participating in Eurovision. The country has to lie within the European Broadcasting Area, and it has to be a member of the United Nations ITU agency. And both Palestine and Israel are in the European Broadcasting Area because the whole region was once under British rule, mandatory Palestine. But Israel is allowed to join the ITU, and Palestine is not, because Israel and the US are blocking Palestine from becoming a full UN member. Israel can participate in this European Song Contest despite being in the Middle East because of European colonialism, and Palestine can't because the colonizers forbid it. So it is impossible for Palestine to have a voice at Eurovision. Visibility is not even an option. Eurovision is presented as a tool for liberation when in reality, it's a tool of colonialism. Israel has publicly admitted that to them, Eurovision is foreign policy propaganda. So the idea that Cora just needed to come out of the closet and be openly Hellion is a poor allegory and terrible commentary on appropriate forms of resistance under occupation. In classic Who, the oppressed peoples must be proven sufficiently civilized to be afforded their liberation. Similarly, the only way for the Hellions to be liberated is to be appropriately absorbed into Eurovision, the peak of European civilization. And at a time when Israel is collectively punishing all of Gaza for an act of terrorism, the message of "don't do terrorism, sing a song at Eurovision instead" feels like a piece of Israeli propaganda. It's a message about trying to resolve October 7th peacefully, and not a message confronting every single day for nearly 2 years that has come after that, nor the 75 years which came before. Genocide and colonialism are not the real problem of the episode. But, well, it's quite possible that this episode was never meant to be about Palestine in the first place. When the new Superman film took off in July, people immediately started freaking out saying, this was about Israel, this is about Palestine. And it really does feel like it is. A cruel, vicious politician slaughtering innocent civilians feels very familiar right now. But this film went into pre-production way back in April 2023. There's definitely a good chance that the events of October 2023 started to influence the production, but it's clear that Superman also has someone else in mind. I mean, this is Putin, right? He's Slavic, he loves a narcissistic horse portrait. It's clearly Russia and the invasion of Ukraine. Now, the Interstellar Song Contest script was also commissioned at the start of 2023. And we can see that in May 2023, Catherine Tate appeared in Eurovision making Doctor Who allusions. Allons-y! So this plan was in the works way back. And so far as I've seen, scriptwriter Juno Dawson has only alluded to one specific group of people who inspired the Hellions. And they were not Palestinians. They were Ukrainians. Dawson said, "At the time I was writing this, I was really struck by how the news cycle had forgotten about Ukraine. That's how I came to the Hellions and their plight." The two Eurovisions which sandwiched Dawson's episode commission were 2022, in which Ukraine won by a landslide and Russia was kicked out, and 2023, which was co-hosted by Ukraine. So Russia and Ukraine would definitely be at the forefront of anyone's mind working on a Eurovision script in 2023, potentially more so than Israel. We also know that the creative team behind this episode are explicitly opposed to Israel's genocide of the Palestinians. That goes for Juno Dawson, stars Shruti Gatwa and Varada Sethu, and showrunner Russell T Davies.
Here we are now, practically living through a genocide.
Gatwa was actually meant to be delivering the UK's points for the Eurovision 2025 final, clearly a tie-in for Interstellar, but he pulled out, perhaps coincidentally, minutes after the announcement that Israel had got through to the final. So honestly, I think it's quite probable that this episode wasn't really meant to be about Israel and Palestine at all. It's just a bad take on colonialism. The Mutants was written about apartheid South Africa, but today, 53 years later, it reads as if it's about Palestine. And honestly, it still works pretty well because It has a coherent narrative about colonialism, so it's easy to apply that narrative to Palestine. And regardless of whether Superman was written by Ukraine, it still managed to upset Israelis as being too nice about colonized people, so it was clearly doing something right. But why isn't there a coherent message in Interstellar? Well,
because there can't be.
Because this episode is essentially a promo tie-in for the BBC's Eurovision broadcast. It was never going to be possible to make a coherent critique of something while doing cross-promotion with it. The corporation can't be the baddie of the episode because that would make the baddie someone who is working with Eurovision, paying for Eurovision, using Eurovision to whitewash horrific violence, all things that are happening with Eurovision in real life. Even if Juno Dawson and Russell T Davies wanted to comment on Eurovision's complicity in colonial violence, at the end of the day, the main function of this episode is just to leave viewers saying, oh, go on then, leave it on, we'll watch a bit of Eurovision. If you're looking for a valid comment on Palestine right now, I would look at the little girl Poppy in Reality War and the idea that the life of one single child is worth dying for, because almost every British, American and Israeli politician right now is happy to watch thousands of children die, when in truth, one child is too many. One child is too many. We pick and choose which messages we take away from Doctor Who, and for me, it's this. There is no life that isn't important. Despite the problems with this episode, what gives me hope is that so many people saw through the bullshit. The tides are turning. The public opinion stands against genocide. There's a reason politicians are complaining about social media and banning boycotts and protests and direct action, because they work. Each of us can make a difference. Fuck these fascists. Keep boycotting, keep protesting, keep posting, keep pressuring politicians. We keep going until there's a free Palestine.